I had always trusted her, my daughter-in-law. Bright, charming, always quick with a smile that could make anyone's defenses drop. I thought she genuinely cared about our family. That illusion shattered in a single morning. I was going through the monthly accounts, something I usually left to my husband. Maybe it was intuition or just habit, but that day I decided to check. And that's when I saw it. A withdrawal, $60,000 gone. Not a small mistake, not a typo, real money. My blood ran cold. I stared at the screen, hoping it was some kind of error. I double-checked the statements, traced every number. No mistake. It was all there, gone, unaccounted for, and linked directly to her. The woman who sat at family dinners, laughing and sharing stories, had taken what wasn't hers. My mind raced. How could she betray me like this? Betray the son she claimed to love, the family that had welcomed her? I could feel my hands trembling, my chest tightening. Anger, disbelief, and a strange cold resolve began to mix together. I didn't confront her immediately. I couldn't. I needed a plan. Every instinct screamed at me to act carefully. One wrong move and I'd have no evidence, no control, and she would slip through my fingers. And she had to be taught that this kind of betrayal comes with consequences. That's when I made my decision. I would not only recover what was stolen, but I would also make sure she understood. No charm, no manipulation, and no lies could ever take advantage of me again. I waited until the evening when the house had quieted and my son was out running errands. I needed her alone to see her reaction before she could plan excuses or lies. "Can we talk?" I asked calmly as she entered the kitchen, her usual cheerful demeanor slightly off. She nodded, curious but unsuspecting. I could feel the tension in my chest, the anticipation of watching someone squirm without them knowing it was coming. I didn't waste time. "Do you know anything about a withdrawal of $60,000 from our account?" I asked, watching her closely. Her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, the tiniest crack in her practiced mask. She laughed nervously, shaking her head. "What? No, that must be a mistake. Are you serious?" Her tone was light, but her eyes were calculating. She was used to deflecting. I had expected that. I leaned in slightly, voice low but firm. "It's not a mistake. I checked. Every transaction, every withdrawal, it's traced directly to you." I let the words hang in the air. Her breath hitched just slightly. That's when I knew the first crack had appeared.
She tried again, softer this time. I would never. "You did," I interrupted, letting the quiet room emphasize the truth. "And you're going to make this right, but not in your way, in mine." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw fear. She thought I'd yell, call my son, or demand immediate repayment. But I wasn't done yet, not until I had a plan that ensured she would learn exactly what betrayal costs. She sat there, silent now, fingers twisting together in her lap. I could almost hear her thoughts racing, calculating, searching for a way out. I had seen that look before in people who thought they were smarter than everyone else, people who believed consequences were for others. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten her. That would have been too easy and too temporary. Instead, I said something that made her look up sharply. "I'm not calling the police. Not today." Relief flashed across her face, quick and careless, and that was when I knew she had underestimated me. But don't misunderstand, I continued, my tone steady. This money will come back to me, every dollar, and you're going to earn it back in a way you won't forget. She frowned. What do you mean? I stood up, feeling a calm settle over me that I hadn't felt since discovering the theft. I mean, you're going to work for me under my rules, full transparency, no shortcuts, no lies, and if you refuse, everything, everything comes out, to my son, to the family, to the authorities. Her face drained of color. She finally understood this wasn't a confrontation, it was a turning point. I wasn't reacting anymore, I was directing the outcome. And if you're listening to this and thinking about how often people take advantage of kindness, let me say this once. If this story resonates with you, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and tell me your city in the comments. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most. She nodded slowly, defeated but not yet broken. She didn't know it then, but by stealing from me, she had unknowingly applied for the hardest job of her life. The next morning, I handed her a notebook, not gently. I placed it on the table between us, like a contract that didn't need signing. Her eyes followed it, cautious, uncertain. You're going to write everything down, I said. Every task, every hour, every dollar you touch. You don't move money, speak to clients, or make decisions unless I say so. She swallowed. Is this really necessary?
Yes, I replied without hesitation, because trust is gone, and this is what accountability looks like. I ran my own consulting business, small but profitable. She knew that. She had always admired it, asked questions, pretended she wanted to learn. Now she would learn, not as family, not as a favor, as someone who had to earn back what she stole. Her first assignments were simple but humiliating. Filing, data entry, cross-checking receipts from years back, work I had once outsourced, now deliberately placed in her hands, not to punish, but to ground her, to make her understand the value of every dollar she had taken so casually. She tried to complain once. "This is beneath me," she muttered under her breath. I looked at her, calm but unyielding. So was stealing. She didn't argue again. By the end of the week, the confidence she used to wear like armor was gone. In its place was exhaustion, reality, and something else I recognized well, fear of losing control. She had taken $60,000 from me thinking I wouldn't notice, wouldn't act, wouldn't fight back. She was wrong on all 3 counts. And this was only the beginning. By the second week, the cracks started showing. She arrived early every morning, not out of dedication, but fear. Fear of slipping, fear of being caught again, fear of the power shift she could no longer ignore. The woman who once walked through my house like she owned it now asked permission before sitting down. I watched her closely, not with cruelty, but with precision. I noticed how often she checked her phone, how her shoulders tensed whenever I reviewed her work, how her voice softened when she spoke to me. Respect born from accountability feels very different from respect born from affection. This one was real. One afternoon, I deliberately left a small discrepancy in the books. Nothing major, just enough to test her honesty. She found it. I could tell she debated whether to fix it quietly or tell me. When she finally came to my desk, her hands were shaking. "There's a mistake here," she said. "I didn't make it, but I wanted you to know." That moment mattered more than she realized. "Good," I said. "That's how trust begins. Slowly, painfully." At home, my son started noticing the change. She was quieter, less defensive, tired in a way that had nothing to do with chores. One night, he asked her what was wrong, and for the first time, she didn't have a smooth answer ready. She was learning something she had avoided her entire life. Money has weight, power has responsibility, and shortcuts always come with a bill. Eventually, she had stolen from the wrong woman, and now, every single day, she was paying it back, not just in dollars, but in humility. By the third week, the house felt different, quieter, heavier, like everyone sensed something was shifting but couldn't name it. My son watched us from a distance, confused by the new dynamic. He noticed how she asked before speaking, how she waited for my approval, how her confidence had dimmed. "What's going on with you two?" he asked me one evening. I met his eyes and chose my words carefully. "Your wife is learning responsibility," I said, "something every adult eventually has to face." He didn't press further. Part of me wondered if he already knew, if he had felt the imbalance long before I uncovered the theft. Sometimes silence is a choice, not ignorance. At work, I started giving her more complex tasks, budget projections, client summaries, real responsibility, but always monitored. I wanted to see who she was when temptation returned, when opportunity whispered again. She surprised me. Instead of cutting corners, she double-checked everything. Instead of taking credit, she deferred. One afternoon, she looked up from her desk and said quietly, "I didn't understand what money meant before. Not really." I didn't respond right away. I let the silence do the teaching. "You thought it was endless, that other people wouldn't feel the loss." She nodded, eyes lowered. I was wrong. That admission mattered more than an apology. Because apologies can be performative. Change is not. Still, I stayed cautious. Redemption doesn't erase consequences, and trust, once broken, doesn't come back just because someone feels regret. I had learned that lesson the hard way, and she was still far from finished earning back what she took from my account and from my family. It almost came apart one afternoon when my son came home early. I heard his keys before either of us expected him. She froze at her desk, eyes wide, like a child caught doing something forbidden. Not because she was doing wrong now, but because she knew the truth was sitting between us like a loaded weapon. He glanced from her to me. "Why are you working here so much lately?" he asked casually. Before she could speak, I answered. "She's helping me with the business, learning how things really work." There was a pause, the kind where a different answer could have ended everything. She nodded quickly. "I wanted to learn responsibility," she said. Her voice shook just enough to betray how close she was to unraveling. He accepted it, or maybe he chose not to dig. Either way, when he left the room, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Later that day, she approached me, eyes glossy. "Are you ever going to tell him?" she asked. "Yes," I said, without hesitation. "When the time is right, and when you've paid back every dollar." Her face tightened, not in anger, but in understanding. She finally grasped that silence wasn't mercy, it was conditional. That night, I lay awake thinking about how close she had come to destroying not just her marriage, but her own future. She had taken money thinking it was harmless. Now she lived every day knowing one sentence from me could collapse her world. That was the weight she had handed herself. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty holding it. Because consequences don't make you cruel. They make you fair. By the fourth week, something undeniable had changed between us. She no longer flinched when I corrected her work. She listened, really listened. Not with the impatience of someone waiting for permission to leave, but with the focus of someone who understood this was no longer optional. This wasn't punishment anymore. It was reality. One afternoon, I asked her to sit down across from me. I slid a spreadsheet toward her, clean, precise, undeniable. "You've paid back 42,000, I said. "That leaves 18. Her eyes widened. She hadn't realized how far she'd come. Or maybe she hadn't allowed herself to hope. "I'll finish," she said quickly. "I won't stop." "I know," I replied, and for the first time, I meant it. That trust, earned, not given, unsettled her more than my threats ever had. Because now, failure wasn't about fear, it was about disappointing herself. A week later, I gave her authority over a small project, limited scope, clear rules. She handled it carefully, asking questions, documenting everything. When it succeeded, she didn't celebrate, she simply nodded and moved on. That restraint told me more than any apology ever could. Power had shifted completely, not because I demanded it, but because she accepted responsibility. She had gone from someone who took in secret to someone who earned in daylight. And that's when I realized something important. The hardest lesson she was learning wasn't how to work for me, it was how to live without shortcuts. One evening, after everyone had gone to bed, she stayed behind at the dining table. Papers neatly stacked, laptop closed. No excuse to linger, except she needed to say something. "I think about it every night," she said quietly, staring at her hands. "The money, the way I took it. I don't even recognize that version of myself anymore." I didn't respond right away. Regret doesn't need comfort. It needs to be heard. "I was insecure," she continued, "about your success, about my marriage, about myself. I thought money would make me feel equal." Her voice cracked. "It didn't. It made me small." That was the first time she didn't blame circumstances, or stress, or entitlement. She blamed herself. "You can't undo what you did," I said finally, "but you can decide who you become next." She nodded, wiping her eyes. No dramatics, no self-pity, just acceptance. That night, I realized something important. She wasn't afraid of me anymore. She was afraid of becoming that person again. And that fear, when paired with accountability, was finally doing its job. A few days later, something unexpected happened. One of my longtime clients requested a meeting and specifically asked for her, not me, her. I watched her freeze when I told her, eyes wide, shoulders tense. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I can sit in, but—" "No," I said calmly. "You'll lead it. I'll observe." Fear flickered across her face, followed by something stronger, determination. She prepared obsessively. Notes, numbers, backup plans. When the meeting started, her voice wavered for the first 30 seconds. Then it steadied. She answered questions honestly, admitted what she didn't know, promised follow-ups instead of pretending expertise. The client was impressed. Afterwards, in the hallway, she looked at me like she was waiting for judgment. "You did well," I said simply. She exhaled, almost laughing in disbelief. That felt different, earned. That word mattered.
For the first time, she was experiencing success without manipulation, without shortcuts, without theft, and I could see it reshaping her from the inside. At home, my son noticed the change too. He told me one night, "She's different lately, more grounded." I said nothing. Some lessons speak for themselves. Because the real shift wasn't that she worked for me now. It was that she finally understood why she never should have taken what wasn't hers in the first place. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind that usually passes without memory. My son walked into my office unexpectedly and saw her sitting across from me reviewing financial reports like she belonged there. Not helping, not shadowing, working. He frowned. Since when are you two running a business together?" The room went still. She looked at me, panic flashing in her eyes. This was the moment we had both known was coming. You can't build accountability on secrecy forever. "Sit down," I said to him gently. He did, slowly. I didn't soften it. I didn't traumatize it. I told him the truth exactly as it happened, how I found the missing money, how it led back to her, how she confessed, and how she had been working every day to repay what she stole. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he turned to her. His voice wasn't angry. That somehow made it worse. "Is it true?" he asked. She nodded, tears slipping down her face. "Yes, every word." Silence filled the room. Heavy, unavoidable. "I trusted you," he said quietly. "I trusted both of you." "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it right if you let me."
He stood up and walked out without another word. That night, none of us slept. Because betrayal doesn't end when the truth is spoken. It ends when the consequences are fully lived. The sound of my son's footsteps fading down the hallway stayed with me long after the house went quiet. I didn't follow him. I didn't chase explanations. Some truths need space to settle before they can be faced. She sat frozen in the chair, shoulders caved in, like the weight of everything she'd done had finally landed all at once. This wasn't fear of being exposed anymore. This was the fear of losing what mattered most. "I never meant to hurt him," she said softly. "Or you. I know, and I meant it, but intention doesn't erase damage." That night, she didn't come home. She stayed with a friend, giving my son the distance he needed. I watched him move through the house like a stranger, quiet, distant, carrying a grief that wasn't loud but was heavy. For the first time since this began, I questioned myself. Not my decision, but the cost. Accountability is necessary, but it's never painless. Still, when I looked at the numbers the next morning, the truth grounded me. 17,000 left, nearly all of it repaid. Not promised, paid. She hadn't run, she hadn't lied again. She had stayed and faced it. And that mattered more than tears ever could. Because real change shows up even when forgiveness hasn't. My son didn't speak to her for 3 days. Not a text, not a call, just silence, the kind that forces you to sit with every mistake you've ever made. I watched her come into the office anyway, eyes swollen, posture straight, doing the work without being asked. She didn't use her pain as an excuse. That's when I knew karma was already at work. On the 4th day, my son finally showed up. He didn't look at her at first. He looked at me. He asked, "Did she really pay most of it back?"
"Yes," I said, "by working every day under my supervision." He nodded slowly, processing. Then he turned to her. "Why didn't you just ask for help?" She swallowed hard. "Because I was ashamed of needing it and arrogant enough to think I could take it." That honesty hit him harder than any excuse would have. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. People who had once dismissed her as entitled began respecting her. Not because they knew what she'd done, but because they saw who she was becoming. Reliable, precise, accountable. She wasn't rebuilding her image, she was rebuilding her character. And karma, I realized, doesn't always arrive as punishment. Sometimes it arrives as a mirror you can't look away from. By the end of the 2nd month, every dollar was accounted for. Every cent of the $60,000 was repaid, not as a gift, not as borrowed money, but earned through honest labor, sweat, and accountability. I watched her tally the final numbers herself, double-checking every receipt, every calculation. She looked up at me, eyes wide. "It's done. Everything is back." I nodded, letting the moment hang, not congratulating, not forgiving outright, just acknowledgement. She needed to feel the weight of her actions fully, and she did. For the first time, she didn't try to justify herself, didn't smile to soften the blow, didn't manipulate with charm. She understood the consequence of every decision she had made, and it wasn't pleasant. My son entered the room, eyes scanning the papers, then her face. "It's all returned?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said, voice trembling. "And I understand now why it wasn't just about money. It was about trust, and I broke it." That realization, the humility, the acknowledgement, the understanding, was worth more than the money ever was, because money can be earned. Trust, once broken, takes a lifetime to rebuild. And in that quiet moment, I knew the power dynamic had shifted permanently. She worked under me not because I forced her, but because she had no other choice if she wanted to reclaim even a fragment of respect. The days that followed were filled with quiet observation. She showed up early, left late, and never once complained about her assignments. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the constant mental check to avoid mistakes, the weight of earning back what she had taken. She asked questions now, genuinely, instead of pretending to know everything. She double-checked her work before submitting it, and when she messed up, which she inevitably did at first, she owned it immediately. No excuses, no deflection. That honesty, hard-earned as it was, spoke volumes. My son watched silently, unsure at first how to react, but over time he noticed her commitment, her fear of slipping, and her small victories. He began treating her differently, not with the indulgence of ignorance, but with cautious respect. She was no longer the carefree, entitled woman she had been. I noticed subtle changes in her demeanor. She smiled less to charm, more to acknowledge. She apologized without prompting, and she asked permission instead of assuming authority. Every interaction was a lesson in accountability, and she was learning, painfully but effectively. And through it all, I kept my distance emotionally, not to punish, but to ensure the lesson remained intact. True responsibility cannot thrive under sympathy. She had to face the consequences fully. By the end of the month, she had transformed. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to recognize the woman she used to be and the person she needed to become. By now, her transformation was noticeable, not just to me, but to everyone around her. Relatives who once praised her charm now commented on her diligence. Friends who had envied her lifestyle noticed the shift from entitlement to effort. One afternoon, she accidentally sent a corrected report to a client before I had approved it. She panicked, expecting my fury, but I stayed calm. "Mistakes are learning opportunities," I said. "Own it, fix it, and move on." She nodded, absorbing every word. At home, my son finally confronted her gently. "I can see you're changing," he admitted, "but do you really understand why this all happened?" "Yes," she whispered. "I was greedy. I was careless. I thought charm and lies could replace work and honesty. I was wrong, and now I see how much damage that caused, not just to you, but to everyone who trusted me." That admission, spoken aloud, carried more weight than any punishment I could have delivered. Karma wasn't just the work I had assigned her. It was the reality she had created and now had to live with. Her social circle also began to notice. Friends who once idolized her for her luxury and charm now commented on her transformation, subtle reminders that privilege doesn't erase responsibility. She was learning humility the hard way, in every sphere of her life. And as I watched her adjust, I felt a quiet satisfaction. This wasn't vengeance, it was justice, and justice had a way of reshaping people in ways money or status never could. By now, the ripple effect of her actions had extended beyond our home. People she had relied on for favors, admiration, and social validation began to notice the change. Where she had once been the confident, carefree center of attention, she now moved cautiously, aware that everyone had witnessed her fall from grace. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation at a small gathering. A friend she had once confided in was quietly mentioning her mistakes, not cruelly, but with the unmistakable undertone of accountability. She's working under her mother-in-law now, and I heard it's because of a major financial mess. Her face paled the moment she realized people were talking, not exaggerating, not judging her privately, but recounting facts. She had underestimated how quickly reputation could crumble when actions spoke louder than charm. At home, she avoided eye contact, even with my son. She no longer attempted to charm or manipulate conversations. Every word she spoke felt measured, deliberate, as though she carried the weight of her misdeeds with her. I knew then that karma wasn't just monetary repayment. It wasn't just working under me. It was the invisible pressure, the social consequences that truly humbled her. She was learning accountability in ways she couldn't escape, and for the first time, I felt a complete sense of closure. She wasn't just paying back the money, she was paying for the arrogance, the deceit, and the belief that she could take without consequence. Karma had arrived in every form it could. With the money repaid and karma quietly doing its work, the next challenge was rebuilding trust. My son still kept his distance, and understandably so. Trust isn't given back overnight, and no amount of repayment can instantly erase a trail. She approached me one morning, hesitant, with a notebook in hand. She said, "I want to do more," she said softly. "I want to prove I can be responsible beyond this, for the family, for the business." I studied her carefully. Her voice lacked manipulation. Her posture lacked arrogance. For the first time, I sensed sincerity rather than fear or obligation. "Then show me," I said, "every day, with every task." Over the following weeks, she continued to work diligently, not just for repayment, but to earn credibility. She began handling small projects independently, reporting back with transparency and precision. Mistakes were corrected immediately, with no excuses. My son began noticing. One evening, he remarked, "I can see she's changed, not just because you made her, but because she wants to." That acknowledgement was subtle but meaningful. Slowly, the family dynamic began to shift, though the lessons of betrayal were not forgotten. She was still learning humility and responsibility, but the shift from entitlement to accountability was unmistakable. She understood now that respect must be earned, not demanded, not manipulated. By now, the lessons had sunk in. She no longer argued or resisted my guidance. Every task she completed carried evidence of effort, attention, and accountability. What once took coercion and fear now required only diligence and focus. One evening, I called her into my office for a final review of her progress. "You've completed all tasks, repaid every cent, and shown real growth," I said. "Do you understand what this means?" She hesitated, eyes downcast. "I understand that I can't take shortcuts, that actions have consequences, that trust isn't given freely," she replied quietly. "Exactly," I said. "And it doesn't stop here. Responsibility is a lifelong lesson. Remember what led you here, and never forget what it feels like to rebuild what you've destroyed." For the first time, she looked me in the eye without fear. Instead, there was a new awareness, a respect forged through experience, not intimidation. She finally grasped that her actions had consequences far beyond the money she stole.
That night, as I watched her leave the office, I felt a profound sense of closure. She had been humbled, held accountable, and transformed, not fully, but enough for karma to have its permanent mark. And I knew that the next time she faced temptation, she would think twice. Months had passed since the theft, and life had settled into a new rhythm. She worked under my supervision, always accountable, always aware of the consequences that had reshaped her. The $60,000 had been repaid, but the true repayment was far greater: humility, respect, and responsibility.
One afternoon, she approached me with a proposal for a small client project, fully prepared, every detail checked and double-checked. She spoke confidently, but with the awareness that every action carried weight. I nodded, impressed, not just by her work, but by the transformation I had witnessed. Later that day, I heard her friends gossiping about her fall of grace and her new position working under her mother-in-law. For the first time, she felt the social consequences of her actions. People who once envied her lifestyle now respected her diligence, or at least understood she had paid her dues. Karma had reached beyond our household. My son finally approached her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I see you've changed," he said. "Not because I said so, but because I watched it happen. That's all that matters." I smiled quietly from the doorway. Justice had been done, not through vengeance, but through accountability. She had stolen, yes, but she had also learned, and that lesson would last a lifetime. Every attempt to cheat or manipulate in the future would meet the same unyielding reality. In the end, the theft had not just been repaid with money, it had been repaid with wisdom, humility, and the undeniable truth that actions always have consequences. And as I watched her carry herself differently, I knew karma had spoken, loudly, clearly, and justly. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and write your city in the comments. Your support helps share more real-life stories like this one.